Thank you for joining me today. It's Brian Gubernick, and welcome to the No Days Off podcast, where we believe that every single day brings a new opportunity to get better. We spend a considerable amount of time talking about mindset here at No Days Off. We talk about discipline and motivation and focus. But I think that there's an uncomfortable truth that so many of us miss, myself included. That is that if your brain chemistry is off, none of the conversation that we have around mindset matters. Your business, your leadership, your wealth, all of it runs through a biological machine. And that machine is either properly fueled and balanced or it isn't. The brain is not a fixed organ. The brain's actually an upgradable performance machine. And when your brain changes, everything in your life changes. Today, we're going to spend a little bit of time talking around the brain and how it impacts what it is you do both personally and professionally. It's a conversation that we were fortunate to have. My partner, Ben, at Metrics Masterminds was fortunate to have last week when we were running our mastermind here in Scottsdale. One of the most useful ideas of the material that we covered at Metrics was around this. When you don't feel like yourself, when you're flat, when you're irritable, maybe you're anxious or you're unfocused or you're unmotivated, it's not usually a character flaw. It's almost always impacted by your chemistry. Specifically, there are four systems, and one of the four systems is out of balance: dopamine, serotonin, oxytocin, or endorphins. So dopamine, serotonin, oxytocin, or endorphins. If you don't realize it's the brain, you start projecting those feelings onto your business or your relationships or your circumstances. And you may be solving the wrong problem. That's why I want to focus on the brain in these four systems today. Let's start with dopamine. Dopamine is the motivation molecule. Dopamine drives reward-seeking behavior, focus, and learning and momentum. Now, dopamine spikes when there's novelty, progress, when there's anticipation, or when there's achievement. That's why people checking their social media nonstop or chasing the next deal feels rather productive, even when it isn't. Dopamine doesn't care if something is good or bad. It only cares if it in fact worked. Now, here's the danger. Repeated dopamine spikes without recovery lower your baseline. So you're not getting more motivated. You're becoming dependent on this dopamine. I think that's when people start to say things like, I just don't feel like myself anymore. So dopamine's about motivation and drive. Now there's serotonin. Serotonin is the mood stabilizer. It's what allows for calm and confidence. It allows for self-esteem and emotional control. It's triggered by sunlight, exercise, gratitude, social validation, and routine, stable routines. Low serotonin doesn't just make you sad, it actually makes you pretty reactive. And that's when decision quality drops and impulse control weakens. Your long-term thinking collapses. This is why leaders under chronic stress start making short-sighted decisions. It's not a lack of intelligence. It very well may be a lack of serotonin. Which leads us to oxytocin, which is around trust and connection. Oxytocin is what I would call the bonding hormone. It builds trust, it builds empathy, it builds emotional connection. Enough oxytocin lowers anxiety and creates psychological safety. But without it, you can still function, but you won't thrive. This matters more than most people think. Low oxytocin environments, like a cold leadership environment, constant pressure, transactional relationships, these things quietly erode teams and quietly erode cultures. Trust is not a soft concept. It's actually a chemical state when you think around oxytocin. Then the last one to talk around is your endorphins. Endorphins pertain to pain, stress, and resilience. Endorphins are your natural painkillers. They take on stress, they reduce pain, they create brief feelings of pleasure. Now endorphins are triggered by effort, they're triggered by exercise, laughter, sometimes music, even discomfort. And when endorphins run low, people start to feel numb or they feel restless or they're drawn to risky behavior just to feel something. Endorphins are structurally similar to morphine, except your body makes endorphins itself. That's why it's about resilience chemistry is what we're going to call it. So what's the big insight? What's the big takeaway here? The key takeaway from what we're talking about is that you are not mentally exhausted. You might be metabolically underpowered. So when your energy drops, strategy fails, and when chemistry stabilizes, clarity starts to return. Excellence in this scenario isn't just a habit, it's very much a potential brain configuration, if that makes sense. So, what do we do with all this new knowledge that we now have? What's our action item? I think we keep it pretty simple. I think over the next week, when you start to feel off, instead of asking, hey, what's wrong with me? Maybe you ask instead, which system of the four is out of balance right now? Am I understimulated or overstimulated? Do I need progress or do I need grounding? Do I need connection or do I need recovery? These small chemical corrections can prevent big life problems, but you've got to be able to recognize the pattern early. You don't need a new personality. You just maybe need to upgrade your brain and have greater understanding or knowledge around these things. So, again, your action item, instead of asking what's wrong with me, ask yourself what system might be out of balance right now. Of course, it goes without saying, I am not your doctor, but my idea here or my thought is to give you some knowledge around something you should be tracking. And then based on what you observe, take action around that. And that very well may be sitting down with your health professional. That's all I have for you today, the No Days Off podcast. Thank you so much for listening. And remember, every single day brings a new opportunity to get better. So let's get after it.